r/ask Reddit. What's a video game you enjoyed that most people disliked? Anyone remember True Crime? Streets of LA? It seemed like a very love or hate game and I absolutely loved it. I liked how the story would branch out depending on what you did in certain missions. The martial arts were fun too. I remember the gun combat feeling kind of flat though. You have the right to soak in your own urine. Yeah, the gunplay was a little arcade, and all I really appreciated was blowing away a fleeing suspect in slow motion. Good fights though. Check out Sleeping Dogs if you like that. The first Watch Dogs. Maybe it wasn't everything they promised, but it was still a pretty good game. Best gunplay of the entire franchise. It feels too weird killing everyone as Marcus in the second game. And you weren't supposed to identify with Aiden. Dude was messed up. T-Bone was a way more likeable protagonist. Plus the missions against default were the best in the series. Spore. Granted, I wasn't aware of the game till after it released, so I didn't know about all the hype and high expectations other people had. It has its issues, but it's still quite fun and sunk many hours into it. Spore is a great game. It's just weighed by the fact that if EA didn't cut production when it was 70% finished, it could have been a fantastic game. Mercenaries 2 for PS3. I loved that game. Played through it 3x. Terrible online reviews, and if you did an update the game would freeze forever. The main guy's quotes are etched into my brain. Woo. Bumpercars. Chicks dig scars. Shrapnel. Hey, you on the 50 calorie. How would you like an airstrike? Dynasty Warriors. People give me shit all the time for liking DW like you just mash one button. I guess if you went it thinking it was gonna be Tekken I could see how you might be disappointed. But if you go in expecting Double Dragon it's great. It's cheesy and campy and the 1 vs 100 gameplay is super fun. Dynasty Warriors on PS2 was my jam. I replayed the campaign so many times just to try all the heroes. The Godfather. You couldn't tell me I wasn't a mob boss. What wasn't there to like? It was a GTA clone with the Corleone family. My ex thought it was corny, but I was obsessed. That and LA Noire. I wish I had the time to play those again. Turok. That late 2000s remake. I'm no longer alone. You talking about the 2008 one where you're part of Whiskey Company? I'm not sure what people dislike about it, but since there hasn't been a next one, but clearly it didn't do well. The early 2000s one Evolution was busted. Nearly impossible without cheats. A storyline that made no sense. And horrendous voiceovers. That one is still one of my favorites. BioShock 2. I know people don't consider the story to be as impactful as the first one, but the gameplay is way more polished. Also, I get to use a duck-in drill as a weapon. That is sweet. I was a little taken aback by the amount of hate Infinite got too, even though I thought it was a lot of fun. Not sure if it's really hated, but Star Fox Adventures could be considered the black sheep of its series. Is it a good Star Fox game? No, since you're almost never in the Arwing. But damn, is it a good furry Zelda clone. Still one of my favorite games all these years later. There's just something super charming about it. Shadow the Hedgehog. Don't get me wrong, that game has issues, but overall I still had fun with it and would love to see a sequel that learns from the mistakes of the first game. As a kid I wasn't allowed to play games with guns. Shadow was the one exception, so it was the coolest crap ever. Then I found out it had swears. Another no-no. So to make sure it was never banned I played the whole game on volume 0 straight up. I loved Shadow. Haha. COD Ghosts. Fun game. Like. Shitty, but fun. Awesome story. Fun multiplayer with the addition of the Predator and Michael Myers. Infection or whatever the alien mode was a fun take on the Horde mode that COD often has. I think the game just came out too early. It was ahead of its time and that's why it flopped. Fallout 4. Yep, dialogue trees weren't as varied as the predecessors, but the game was fantastic. My melee playthrough is one of the stupidest and most enjoyable RPG experiences I have ever had. Opening up the skill tree to where you could, with enough time, fully complete it gave so much more freedom to experiment on the fly. The base building was a novel idea that would have been 1000x better if you could let your settlements naturally develop instead of micromanaging an entire map. It gets so much hate and I simply don't get why. If you're playing on PC, there's a really excellent mod called Sim Settlements where you just have to place lots and the settlers do the building for you. It's not exactly automated settlements, but it made the game much more enjoyable for me. The structures all vary and upgrade on their own. There's a lot of personality in the details. 2. Star Wars Battlefront 2. It was so panned for its greedy microtransactions I never even considered buying it. I downloaded it on Xbox Gamers Pass a few months ago and it's so much fun. It reminded me of the old ones, which I honestly think is all anybody ever wanted. They obviously put some work in to fix their old mistakes. Too bad if they had just come out with the product they have now, it would have probably been an instant classic. It's sad how many of the games in this thread could have been fan favorites if they hadn't been rushed and or had microtransactions forced in. You'd think the greedy asses would learn to stop pushing the developers so much, but they're still doing exactly what they've been doing for decades. Assassin's Creed 3, Revolutionary War and scenery was so awesome. By far my favorite Assassin's Creed, alongside Black Flag. The only thing I hated was no armor or health upgrade. Almost everyone having guns made it pretty hard, for me at least. The Legend of Zelda, Phantom Hourglass. That's actually one of the few Zelda titles I never got to play. Sad to hear people disliked it. I wanted to play if I ever got the chance. Death Stranding. It was really amazing to see a AAA game with such a novel premise that was also enjoyable. Someone was going on a rant about all the things he hated about the game, and I was like, wait, that sounds amazing. I want all of that. Got it. Love it. People complain there's not enough action. I'm the opposite. The enemy sections are too stressful for me, and I'd be perfectly happy just playing Male Dad Simulator uninterrupted. Rugrats. Search for Retta was a genuinely fun, well-made game and I'd play it again today if I could. I remember there was a golfing level and you could go off course and go in the pyramid. I remember something was in there that terrified me as a child. I'm going to look it up now, lol. Cyberpunk 2077 is actually a lot of fun. It really is. And I was on the pessimist train when everyone else was hyping it before launch. Now all of a sudden they're too good for it and won't sully their hands to play such a thing. Their loss. It's duckin' epic. Hitman Absolution. I thought 47 was still badass as usual and entitled to feel some emotions. After all the years working with the Ica, it would make sense to develop emotions over time. Yeah, the environment was a little different than the others, but I still thought it to be creative and well written. I'm a hardcore Hitman fan, but I agree this was a good game. I still rate it bottom out of all the others, but I had a lot of fun with it. I just prefer the genre of the others. Legend of Zelda, Skyward Sword. I'm not a big fan of Zelda games, but I got it because I wanted to give the franchise another chance and it was newest game at the time. It did eventually get me into Ocarina of Time. I didn't realize people disliked Skyward Sword, one of my all-time faves. It was good fun, but having to buy a special Wii remote made my mom all shades of pissed. No Man's Sky. I personally enjoyed how weird the game can be, though I do understand why so many people were pissed off when it was first released. Same. They haven't stopped releasing content either. Just recently it was a companion update, so now you can take aliens you find as pets and modify their genes and ride them around and stuff. Before that it was weapon modifications, and better bases, and biomechanical ships, and a better multiplayer hub, and random space encounters, and mech suits, and more biomes, and NPC updates, and space station redesigns, and planetary superstores, cosmetic parts, ship recycling, space hulks, scrap trading, capital ships, private fleets, stargates, black holes, log updates, submarines, ghost trees, cyclones, firewalls, and on and on and on. Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link. Back when it came out, it wasn't unusual for game sequels to wildly shift genres. I loved the combat of the second game so much more than the first, and the music was amazing. I wish they made more games in its style instead. I played through it on the NES Classic, and damn, it's a fun game. Some parts were super difficult, but oh so rewarding when you finally get it. Both Division games, I just like them. The biggest thing I don't like about it and what's keeping me from playing it all the way through is that every enemy is a duck-in bullet sponge. Like after the first 1, 4, 1, 3 of the game it started to take too much just to kill one guy that it took me out of it. Yeah, I ran into the same problem in Division 2. First half of the game was pretty beefy, but always felt fair. Then all of a sudden it felt like a brick wall even with up-to-date weapons, mods and perks. Really sad, because the environment and levels are top notch. Sold the I Am Legend vibe extremely well. Mass Effect Andromeda. I like the huge worlds, the storyline, the terraforming element, and I played it about a year in so I didn't have any graphical issues. I played day 1 and I can personally attest to the graphical issues being massively overplayed. They really were nowhere near as common as people made them out to be, and certainly not as gamma-breaking as they made them sound. People were just still riding a hate wave for the third game's ending and wanted to punish the franchise for it still. Well, they damn near killed the franchise and succeeded in getting any future DLC for Andromeda tabled. So I hope they're happy. AC Unity. Dragon Age 2, it being usually considered the black sheep of the franchise, it had its faults, namely the rather heavily reused environments, but I really liked it, both character/story wise and general gameplay. I liked that it was the first game of the franchise to give your character voice, and some parts were genuinely interestingly, like Varric embellishing the tale of him storming his brother's home single-handedly. Far Cry Primal, I loved that game for some reason. Yes, loved it too, but I never finished. I think got to about 75-80% and then got distracted with something else, but it was surprisingly immersive. Afro Samurai, so underrated. It had procedural severing unseen in its day, the kind that only showed up again in MG Rising, not to mention authentic VA by the mother ducker himself. Arkham Origins. Yeah, I honestly don't understand this one. I actually really like the game and enjoy the story a lot, even might prefer it over City Asylum, holds special place in my heart. Certainly prefer it over Night, which I am struggling to get through. The Far Cry series. Everyone is like Far Cry 3 is the best one and that's it, but the series has become vastly underrated. Between FC3, Blood Dragon, FC4, Primal, and FC5. You really can't miss. Every single one of them is a fantastic game. I understood why a lot of people didn't like New Dawn, but I enjoyed the hell out of that one, too. Haven't seen it here, so I'll say Borderlands, the pre-sequel. A lot of people were expecting it to be Borderlands 3, which is also a good game. It's short, and doesn't have a lot of endgame content, but I find the space mechanics and laser guns cool. I loved pre-sequel because the new characters and their new skills were super fun. Especially Athena with that Captain America shield. Plus Nisha with dual Hyperion pistols was crazy OP. I would have gladly paid to been able to use the pre-sequel characters in BL2. But, alas, it weren't meant to be. I never understood the hate for that game either. I guess people just had really high expectations. Sonic Unleashed. For the most part. The graphics on that game were so ahead of their time, it's insane. The PS3 and Xbox 360 versions. The Sonic Adventure duology. People say they haven't aged well. They may not be Super Mario 64 level amazing, but I think they still hold up. No game will ever top the Chow Gardens. Sonic Heroes. It's not that bad. It's enjoyable. I don't think the majority of people would consider Sonic Heroes to be a bad game. The game got okay ratings at the time and was unironically my favorite game growing up. Yes, it has issues like the slippy controls and repetitive voice lines, but the level design, visuals and music were all great. I also think it has aged better than the adventure games. Alpha Protocol. I only know maybe a couple of people personally that played it, but it got some extraordinarily mediocre reviews. On top of a turbulent development that culminated in a 6-month delay which seemingly did nothing to improve the state of the game. It is a buggy, unbalanced, clunky mess, but it is also an espionage RPG made by one of the best RPG studios around. extremely replayable with the wealth of skills and decisions that drastically alter the story, and the half-baked stealth and shooting from a studio that didn't usually work within those genres was kind of charming in the way they approached them. Like how critical hits worked and the overpowered invisibility silence abilities. I'd also argue it isn't that far removed from the original Mass Effect in terms of game clunkiness and polish. I just think a ton had happened in the 3 years between games that made them ease quirks more accepted at the time. While AP came out right after ME2 ironed most of those out, on top of other major shooter/stealth games that came out that made you realize just how far behind it was. Lord of the Rings Conquest. It was so fun to play split screen and the campaign was all that it needed to be. What I wouldn't give for a next gen remaster. Pokemon Sword and Shield. I enjoyed it. Pokemon is pretty much heroin to me, so I still got fun out of Sword, but the underlying issues with recent generations have definitely become more apparent over time. Poor AI, unfocused story, new battle gimmicks made for multiplayer end up making the campaign way too easy. I definitely still think the series peaked during the DS era. Dishonored 2 and Deus Ex Mankind Divided weren't received badly, but they were widely overlooked and considered as disappointing sequels. We don't know if either franchise will get any more titles again because of their underwhelming sales. Dishonored 2 is my favorite games of all time and Deus Ex Mankind Divided is one of my favorites. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Thought the story was great and not repetitive. Loved all of the side quests. Loved the combat style. I don't think Odyssey is a disliked game. Many people like Odyssey. The AC sub just criticize it commonly because they think that it's not a AC game, which is understandable, because it's a lot different from the AC games that came before. Odyssey is an objectively good and well-liked game. It even got GOTY. Some people just have a problem with the fact that it's an AC game. Kingdoms of Amalur. Love the art style and combat. The ease of switching classes is great too. Was pleasantly surprised when I heard Alana Pierce reference it some FH episodes. Fun game. Not so much disliked. More like just ignored. But Sunset Overdrive. The game is ducking phenomenal and I've never heard a single person talking about it. I got it for free years ago and literally felt bad that I didn't spend money on it. I enjoyed it so damn much. More on topic would probably be BioShock 2. I just felt so involved in the story. Still the only game to this day that has made me shed actual tears from the best ending. And the gameplay was a solid upgrade from the original. Imo. Lot of people shit on the Final Fantasy 13 games, but I genuinely enjoyed 13 too, and Lightning Returns wasn't even bad. People just got pissy about the plot. Final Fantasy 15. It's not perfect and pretty and finished, but for what it was I enjoyed it. I get a lot of the complaints people have about it, but there are some things there to enjoy I think. The Last of Us 2. I finished playing this recently and could not understand why so many people got butthurt over it. The craftsmanship and storytelling are amazing, and had it not given me a few nightmares, I'm a wuss. It may have edged out Uncharted 4 as my favorite game of all time. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.